Nancy's with us again. We're delighted to have her. She is going to be with us coming up later with 2 different segments of the book of Revelation. And so she's going to give us a little peekaboo about that and give us a little homework assignment down the road. So we have that. Also, she has shared with us, and it's now public, that Nancy will be retiring October 1 from the seminary. So she has earned that, and we wish her well, don't we? And she says she's still going to be with us, speak for us, and certainly be here for Revelation. So she's going to continue this morning with shepherding. She gave us a little tease about she wasn't finished with it last time, so she's back now to fulfill her tease. So let's have Nancy this morning. Thank you.
No, thank you. Oh, I have this on, yeah. Oh, sorry, I turned it on because I'm so awkward with turning it on, and then my mother-in-law and I were having a discussion about where we were last time when I was here. That's why I turned to her and said John 10. So, as Kathy announced this week on Wednesday, we published the news that I am retiring on October the 1st, and it's a good thing. The seminary is in just amazingly fine shape, and I get to work with all these wonderful people, but sometimes they kind of drive me nuts. So, so after that, I will be moving to Louisville. My son-in-law is the pastor of Beargrass Christian Church, which is a church in Louisville that's about the size of Harvard Avenue. And my daughter, her big news this week, he's lucky enough to be married to Marilyn. Marilyn is changing jobs herself, and that's been announced. So Marilyn is going to work for the pension fund of the Christian Church Disciples as Todd Adams' wrangler. If you know Todd, and you will see him. Won't he be here? Didn't? Yeah. So Todd Adams is the president of the pension fund, and Marilyn will be the vice president of administration. And she's really looking forward to rejoining the family business, which is the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. Now, just speaking, one note. Today is Eve's last Sunday at Harvard Avenue Christian Church, for she will be moving to Louisville at the end of this week. This is also her family business, and she wants to be near where I'll be, as well as with Marilyn and Trey, and of course the 2 most adorable grandchildren that God ever created. And so she will be in a assisted living place where she can keep tabs on them. So I think you all know she moved in with me 8 years ago. And she helped take care of Don and kept him company for the last years of his life. And he kept her company as well. So we're looking at a lot of change. And I ask you to join me in saying goodbye to Eve and wishing her well as she goes on to her own journey. So I love you. So, Kathy asked me to say just a few words about the book of Revelation, what we'll be doing. That's a little hard for me to say just a few words. But I want to tell you quite honestly, when we start working on that at the end of August and September, if you are expecting to hear from me what the number 666 definitively means, don't come. Just don't come. And if you want me to tell you exactly when the world is going to end and how we're going to figure that out, you're going to be sadly, sadly disappointed. But if you want to know how we can read the book of Revelation and carry on a relationship with it in a way that has integrity and that can even offer us meaning and purpose in our own lives, that's what we'll be doing. That's what we'll be doing. And believe me, the 2 centuries of American dispensationalism, which permeates our waters, is really a heresy, and we're going to take it on. And by that dispensationalism, all you have to do is think, those ridiculous novels at the turn of the millennium. What were they called? Oh, I'm so sorry. The millennial fever has really, really died down. So we don't have to live in such a fevered pitch of that. But dispensationalism is that let's read the news and see how all the prophecies are coming true. And then we'll figure it all out, and we'll give the date, and we'll all know. And if we're lucky enough, we'll be raptured. And all those poor schmucks on earth will have to live with all this stuff, which is really what that's about. That does remind me just one thing, that we had a speaker at the seminary a couple of months ago that said that many of our churches, not Harvard Avenue, look like the rapture has already happened. I thought, yeah, you're right. Speaking of, here's what we're not going to talk about, but boy, I want to. Keenan handed me this. Please explain how any Christian can support the least Christ-like person on the planet. Explain it to me like I'm in Sunday school. I can't. I don't know. So last time we were here, we were talking about the Gospel of John, and Kathy invited me to come back because we had questions, because I really was racing over a lot of material. And although I think it's been at least 15 years that I've been coming to this class and having the privilege of rambling on and on, pushing words around, I'm just so glad that we can stop now and review and think through what we're doing. So let me just, to get us started, because what I really want to do is have a conversation and not me try to guess what your questions are or what it is that you wish you knew, because I'm out in the ozone talking about something else that nobody cares anything about except me. You probably know that Harry Emerson Fosdick once said, only the preacher comes to church on Sunday morning burning to know what happened to the Jebusites. So you've got to keep me honest and tell me what you're interested in, because I'm far more interested in all kinds of other things. Okay. So, some years ago, I was looking at my notes for the things I have gotten to do with the Challengers. And about 8 years ago, I talked a bit about my relationship with the Bible. Even though for the last 10 years, I haven't gotten to be a biblical scholar very much. I have this ongoing relationship with the Scriptures. And here's how I described it then, and I still would hold to it. The collection of 66 books in our Bible, I understand to be my friends. And I understand that it is our job to cultivate a friendship with these different, very different, disagreeing collection of friends who offer wisdom, understanding. They are, in fact, guides for my real purpose in life, and I think that you share this purpose, and that is to love God and love neighbor through the way of Jesus the Christ. And so the Scriptures are my friends in that journey. They're not my only friends. They're not. But to have a relationship with friends means that you've got to listen to them, which is kind of a problem for those friends who always want to call you in the middle of the day and tell you about their toenails. But, that's what we're doing. We're cultivating a relationship with these wise guides. But here's the problem when we talk about Scripture as friends. We've got to be fair to them. And because these friends were produced, up to 3,000 years ago, and some 2,000 years ago. That is a pretty daggum long time. So we have to create space to let them speak as they wanted to be heard. And to create that space means you've got to have some information about what was going on when these books were being written. Otherwise, what we do is completely put ourselves into our friend's place. So, when we say things like this to our friends, well, I know exactly how you feel, because we just interrupted them to tell them that we know exactly how you feel because my dog died 16 months ago and I'm still struggling and blah, 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 blah. No. Friendship means listening to how they feel and not knowing exactly how they feel. You see what I mean? Now, we also have to be fair to them, and so we've got to be constantly, carrying on a conversation. What in the world do you mean by that? Why would John report that Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one shall come to the Father except through me? Well, we think we might know what the Johannine Jesus meant, but we don't always know. Because what we're doing is putting ourselves in the middle of the Scripture and making it all about me. And the world really is all about me, but, that whole clearing the space for the friend to speak. But we also have to be fair to ourselves. The Bible and all of those friends were written at a time when people did not know the world was round. They didn't know that. They didn't know about dinosaurs roaming the earth centuries before, millennia before. They didn't know that. In my understanding of my friendship, I don't have to check what I know at the door to carry on this relationship. I just don't have to. So I have to also bring myself and allow myself to speak. Now, once I do that, I have to recognize that what I'm doing is from the perspective of a 60-plus white woman raised in the panhandle of Texas, in an incredibly loving family, in a warm and wonderful church with a whole lot of privilege. Got to go to TCU. If you think that's cheap, you ought to look. Got to do everything I wanted to do without regard to money. Fortunately, I did not want to have a mansion, so I was really good about that. But when I say that's who I am, then it's really important to hear who others are and who they bring, what they bring to the text. In current biblical scholarship, that question is really driving a lot of scholarship, and it's good questions. Because what it means is you all think you've met Dr. Arthur Carter, who wakes up and has about 25,000 brilliant insights and then struggles to get them all on paper. Dr. Carter is black. He also actually, as a matter of fact, had a very privileged background, as he will tell you, in comparatively speaking, because he's still black. And there are still people that think, oh dear, you're black, I can't talk to you, or whatever they think. He brings his perspectives. And listening to his perspectives and what it means to be black in America, as that shapes how he hears the Scriptures, then we can begin to enlarge the conversation. So it's not just me and the Bible. It's not just me and Jesus. It's me and my friends in the Scriptures and my friends in the community and my friends who are trusted and wise in the larger Christian community. And now we're really having a conversation. So, I have this lifelong relationship with the Gospel of John and the book of Revelation. Now, we won't talk about either one of these very much. But scholars used to worry a whole lot about, did the person who wrote the Gospel of John write the book of Revelation? The answer, and this I'm going to give you a very clear answer, no. No. But it's possible, and I think likely, that the Gospel of John and the book of Revelation represent a community of followers of Jesus who have real strong concerns about Peter and Paul. There is a very strong kind of anti-Peter, anti-Paul rhetoric in the Johannine literature. Okay, I'm going to stop now. Questions or comments about all that? You're disciples. I haven't said anything that disciples haven't said for forever. But you will hear, I'm not talking about fundamentalism. I'm not talking about the Bible as the answer book. I'm talking about the Bible as friend. Wise, older, sometimes wrong friend. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's all a part of that. So what Kim was asking is, okay, so in the New Testament, you have the Gospel of John, then you have 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and then you have the book of Revelation. Those books together are called, in my world, the Johannine literature. Isn't that lovely? Go tell your neighbors you know all about the Johannine literature. And they represent this minority view. Now, to understand our Bible, we need to understand that in our Jewish traditions, where our roots are, their tendency from the very beginning of their own sense of organizing who they are as a community was to save all the arguments, not just the ones that won. You see, so when you open the Hebrew Bible, if you don't understand that the prophetic literature is arguing against Proverbs and some of that wisdom stuff, they're holding together all of the arguments about God. We Christians have a tendency to say, oh, well, who won? Who won? And win could be anything from Constantine deciding that it was time in the 4th century for all the bishops to come together and put together a simple creed. And everybody's going to believe that creed. That did not work out well for everybody. It worked out well for the Catholic Church and for those Protestants who continue to hold on to that. But there's always a dissenting view. Our New Testament, out of its own Jewishness, is also holding together competing views. So those bishops in the 3rd and the 4th century who began to develop these lists of books that we were going to take as authoritative were willing to hold together opposing views. Which means that, for us disciples, that's good news. Because we're holding together opposing views. We are. And to begin to say, and there is room for us to have this conversation. So, Johannine literature, I said it was anti-Peter, not anti, questioning, challenging Peter, challenging Paul. In the Gospel of John, who is the most authoritative disciple? This is your quiz. You can win. Who is in the Gospel of John? Who is the most authoritative disciple? Hint, it is not Peter. It's the beloved. And there's not even a name for that person. It's just the beloved. And who gets to the tomb first? The beloved. Who gets the answers right on all the tests that Jesus offers? The beloved. Who hangs around at the cross? The beloved. Who does John say, well, you can trust this because I got it straight from the beloved's mouth. And the beloved is not Peter. That's how we know that we're dealing with a different kind of Christianity. of that first century. Okay, are you with me? Have I gone to the Jebusites? So tell me what you're thinking then. So, well, that's a little specious. Okay. Pushing that a little further. In the second centuries, the first and second centuries, there's all these little groups of persons who are going to follow Jesus. And Peter does become the representative of the real, true, authentic tradition. Not until the second and third century, but we see it in the Gospels, the other Gospels. When we're always, Peter, you are the rock on which I'm going to build my kingdom. That's Matthew. And Matthew is making it very clear that Peter's the one. And what was happening, oh, thank you, Hank. What was happening was that there was coalescing around Peter and in Rome a group that wanted to be more organized. And they were trying to figure out who's the authority, and they were patterning themselves out of their experience with Roman bureaucracy and the emperor. So why do those cardinals wear those ridiculous-looking hats? Well, they wear them because that was what Roman leaders wore in those first early centuries. They're patterning themselves after that, and that's the Peter part of the story. We're organizing, and we're institutionalizing. And believe me, as the president of an institution, I think that's a great move to make. Because institutions preserve, they keep, they hold. They become incredibly problematic when they refuse to change, or refuse to listen, or refuse to question. The Johannine group, on the other hand, were not interested in hierarchy at all. So in the final discourse, when this actually does relate to shepherding, I'm just taking my time to get to it. In that last really long speech of Jesus in the middle of the Gospel of John, starts about chapter 14 and goes on and on. You think, God, Jesus, will you just shut up? We need a break. It goes on and on and on. He is calling together a circle of friends. Friends, I call you. Friends, I'm bringing you in. And my advocate is, at this point, not the beloved disciple. My advocate is the Spirit. This is a non-hierarchical, conventicle of like-minded friends who are willing at this stage to listen and discern with each other what it means to follow Jesus with the help of the Spirit. Now, that's really hard to keep things together in that. Because sure enough, it turns out we're human beings, and we start disagreeing about what we think are the essentials. So, you know that great Protestant slogan that disciples use all the time? In essentials, unity. In non-essentials, what is that? Not disunity, but in non-essentials, liberty. Thank you. Oh, Mark, are you the son of a preacher or what? You know, I knew Mark's father. He used to mow his lawn in a suit. Okay, that's a different story. Didn't he? I am telling the truth. In essentials, liberty. In all things, charity. Disciples have kind of added, in agreement, astonishment. Yeah, because we don't agree on anything. Okay, y'all didn't laugh enough. Okay, in agreement, astonishment. Ha, 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 ha. So, here's this conventicle of friends trying to follow the ways of Jesus. By the second century, they have discovered that there are certain things they cannot tolerate with each other. And they're breaking up. And 1st and 2nd and 3rd John is the story of this community breaking up. And they're calling each other names. And as a matter of fact, so is the book of Revelation. It's a story of breakup. Because the primary enemy in the book of Revelation, and you'll have to just come back in August to figure this out, is the other Christians who aren't doing what the Revelation Christians think they ought to be doing. And it goes on today. We're still doing that to each other. So then that Johannine group then represents this whole anti-hierarchical, not very organized, free spirit kind of group that in the end can't hold together. But their writings held together, and we listen to them. They can't hold together in a way that the institutionalized Petrine tradition did. So, okay, now, where are you? What do you what questions then out of all that? Oh, thank you. It's a grouping, loosely organized. A conventicle is similar to the brotherhood. For some of you who've been lifelong disciples or before, it wasn't there Eve. Eve was here when Alexander Campbell was here, so she knew him very well. That's a joke too. The brotherhood was what we called ourselves. And then we got a little tired of the brothers taking all the credit. But especially since the only reason our offices are in Indianapolis are because of the women, the sisterhood. So it's like that. And, we couldn't hold together. We've split. Because that's what a conventicle is. Just this common group of people around an ideal that then they start defining and discover they can't hold together. Yeah.
So I have a question.
Sure.
So Jesus was putting together his disciples.
Mm-hmm.
And he was inviting whoever wanted to come along to come along. As that group sort of matured, how pleased was he?
How pleased was Jesus?
Yeah, with his disciples.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, well, he didn't give them raises. Well, we can't hardly discern the mind of Jesus. It's, in the witnesses that we have a Jesus who stays with them, regardless. So in all four Gospels, Jesus is pretty determined to hold on to them. And I think that's where we get our clue, that he loved them, just as he loves us. And that in spite of the fact that they didn't always love each other, he loved them. Or that they didn't really love him very well sometimes. That's all I can say, Ken. Does that help? Yeah. They're certainly not. And the Gospels never show them to be like-minded. We just forget that because certainty and unity is sometimes safer than questioning and allowing each other to be who they are when it's so challenging to our own beliefs. I mean, it's just hard. Thank you.
Well, you said that some of your friends, obviously, speaking of the Bible, chapters of your friends are not in the Bible.
Right. Oh, thank you.
I'm saying you've got the Shakespeare, for example. You've got these great truths that are not biblical, and then you have people, everything I need to know is in the Bible. But, you'll probably not agree with that last statement.
No.
So what are some of the
Other friends.
other friends?
Yeah, well, I think for us it always depends on the questions we're going to ask. If I'm going to ask a medical question, really, I'm not asking the Gospels. That's not what they're about. If I'm going to ask a question about the universe and the organization of the universe and why do we have an eclipse, I'm not asking the Bible. One of the things that I think I'm envious of is a piece of the Methodist tradition that we disciples could really use. And this is actually going to answer your question. And that is There's experience, what they call the quadrilateral. Experience, reason, scripture, tradition. And you put all these things into conversation, and then you can begin to develop a worldview that is both informed and faithful. Informed and faithful. So that the scripture is authoritative in this way, but our experience, no matter how often we say, oh, you did not see an angel, they're not going to believe you. They're going to say, I saw an angel, so let's just trust it. Why stand around and argue about that? So everyone's experience on the table. Then the reason, all of the sciences and the humanities that come and bring us all kinds of wisdom, and then tradition, how we sort out all of that in our own histories. So those are my other friends, of course. Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot. And then I like you too, so there we are. We're all friends. It's always this constant conversation. Mm-hmm.
Nancy, I think this is one of the reasons why our church here at Harvard Avenue is having such growth and unity in not being united on every front. I think we have great tolerance for each other's opinions. I don't think that we come up with the scriptures being black, white, and absolute. Mm-mm. And much of what you're talking about this morning, I think, applies to all of us here at Harvard Avenue that have found a spiritual home and a spiritual family we feel comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. And not only that, I've been involved with Harvard Avenue since I moved here in 2000, from a distance and then a close. And I've seen this congregation from a distance and a close go through some very painful things. There was a moment, 15, 20 years ago, or several moments, when this church could have chosen to remain the same no matter what. And if they had made that choice, we would not be here. Because once we cling so tightly to what we think we have to be or were, then we can't be faithful anymore. And that's what happens to our churches. So this group was very much a leader in that, in the ways that we finally said, we're just going to have to give up thinking that we're going to find Bob Peake resurrected. And you went through a lot of ministers looking for Bob Peake. Well, and who could ever imitate Bob Peake, for those of you who were fortunate enough to know him? He was the founding pastor of this congregation. And Harriet, his wife, was absolutely indelible, and you can't imitate her. But then I saw you and then was drawn into this because you all made the decision to open up. And I don't mean just about politics or anything. I mean you made the decision to say, okay, let's go forward. And I think Mark Briley helped us do that. I think David Emery does that. And that's exactly what helps us go. But, as disciples, we never think the pastor should have the last word. Maybe the next to the last. But not the last. Yeah, right. So, just get used to it. And so we as a congregation have to take that credit for joining in this invitation to journey into the 21st century and quit thinking that we were going to be 1952 and Harriet was going to come lead us in a game of croquet. I know. Although we'd love it. Yeah.
I know how you feel about the Bible. What do you feel about the Ten Commandments?
The Ten Commandments. That's really a great question. I honor them. I don't live up to them. Hear, O Lord, hear, O people, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, is to me the most appropriate, wonderful expression of what it means to be faithful. The rules, don't murder, don't steal. Those are great rules. And in the first century, when Jesus came, and that's part of that experience piece, what is the experience of Jesus that they're struggling with and that we're struggling with? What we began to see by the end of the first century is this separation of peoples within the Jewish traditions, some of whom were looking for certainty in law. And they became our modern Judaism. And they the rabbis sat down and tried to figure out all the meanings of the law. That's the Talmud and the Mishnah. And they collected it together because it was the law that's going to hold us together. Not for those of us who went with Jesus. It's Jesus that holds us together. So the Ten Commandments are not any more binding than any other commandments in the Bible. I never stone adulterers. I just don't do that. So for me, it's the person Jesus who was busy breaking law and fulfilling law at the same time. Does that help? Did I get to where you're looking? Yeah. Yeah, so I'm just not very interested in inscribing them. The commandments that Jesus said were love God, love neighbor. And those are hard enough. So, thank you. Yeah. Oh, Kenan. Oh, the Great Schism. Oh, we need to get a historian. Again, every time we concretize and insist that our institutions and our verbal expressions of faith, this, that, and the other, we border on idolatry. Because God's very self, cannot be contained. And every time we try to contain God, then we've created something but God. And worshipped that. So the Great Schism is a part of that movement in which people are trying to figure out, it's also political power. It's also political power. And I'm assuming you're referring to the Orthodox Roman Catholic split, which also had a lot to do with the politics of the age when the seat of the Holy Roman Empire, as it were, had moved to Constantinople. And then there began to be all these disagreements about creedal statements. That's our genius as disciples. We get that. But it's also our downfall. Because what holds people together is, oh yes, we all believe that Constantinople is the holiest place. But once we don't do that, then what do we hold together? Did that make any sense, Keenan? I'm sorry. I think you need to have Lisa Barnett or Brianna Wong come and talk about those things. They are first-rate teacher scholars. I think, did I mention Brianna, Dr. Wong? Is she? Okay, I'll help you if I can. I'll lean on her. Yeah, she's this incredibly intelligent, and she's the person that could really give you the answer. Yeah.
Did you want to say anything about shepherding?
Oh yeah, shepherding. Thank you. That's where I was going. That was. Thank you, Kim. Good gravy. And then I'm going to go back to something else. So when you've got this collection, this conventicle, this shepherding becomes dispersed. That is to say, another part of our genius, what makes us look a little like Johannine communities, is that we see shepherds in a collective called elders. And we actually think that all of us are called in some way to care for, lead. We're called, we're authorized to care for, to lead, to teach, to be a part of the community in such a way that we use our gifts and use our gifts where they're called to be. So shepherding then is not about one person in a silly hat. It's about, I know that was really anti-Catholic, wasn't it? It's about what we share together. So for me, when we ordain a disciples minister, and there's conversations about this going on, I believe it's not just the few authorized people who are handing down something from Peter, because I have trouble with Peter too, so it's okay. You don't have to do that. I believe it's the community. So at my ordination, I don't know about yours, Kim, but and I've had 40 years of ordination, everybody joined hands as the community of the faithful and ordained me, because we all represent and we all are called to shepherd. So that's kind of where I'm going, is that when Jesus authorizes us to be shepherds, he's not lifting up one person. He is authorizing the community to be the shepherd. And again, that's really difficult, because wouldn't we rather have somebody else do all the work? I would. Okay. If you don't have any other questions, I do want to say just a few more things. All right. When I was looking over my notes, I noticed that I hadn't talked much with you about the prologue to the Gospel of John, which sets everything up for this gospel. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to kind of try to get yourself in a place where you're not looking out the window or looking to see how everybody else is reacting, but to really hear these words, and then I'll go through them just a little bit. We have 15 more minutes, right? Okay. So are you comfortable? Act like you never heard this before, or like it's not really about Christmas. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him. And without him, not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. Now he came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. Oh, he himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world didn't know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood, or of the will of the flesh, or of the will of humans, but of God. And the Word became flesh and lived among us. And we have seen his glory, the glory of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, 'He who comes after me ranks ahead of me, because he was before me.'" From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. It is God, the only Son, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known. Okay. Remember, I think I said a few moments ago that our New Testament authors are having a conversation with the Hebrew Bible books. And the person who wrote John, we'll just call him John. John is having a particular conversation with the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. And in particular, Moses. And remember, there's a tradition that Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. That tradition is just part of who that is. So this is a dialogue with Moses as the preeminent leader of the Jewish traditions and Moses' books, as it were. So when we say in the beginning, what do you think? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But there's another piece of that tradition that's going on. You all know about wisdom, don't you? She's in the book of Proverbs. She shows up in some of the extra canonical things. In the book of Proverbs, there is in Proverbs 8, and I'm not going to take the time to read this, a conversation about wisdom being with God at the beginning, and God creating through wisdom, and wisdom being a part of all that God is creating. Now, didn't you just now hear that? This wisdom. Somehow John and his crowd have begun to use the same images in the Jewish tradition to talk about Jesus. So 2 things. Jesus is wisdom. Jesus is better than Moses. The last thing I read, no one has ever seen God. Now come on. If we know our Hebrew Bible, we know that Moses claims to have seen God. That's what's said about him. Moses saw God. No one has ever seen God. Right there, we've got a discussion going. We're going to start hashing there. Okay, one more thing. You probably also know that the word that's used in Greek is logos, and that logos has to do with the philosopher's understanding of the rational principle. And by philosophers, I mean Aristotle and the Greek crowd. John probably knows that as well, and is drawing on that same image of the rational crowd, of the rational principle. So see, here's how the conversation is going. He is telling us Jesus is unique from the beginning. He's like this, and he's seen God. And Moses is not. Okay, say so with me. Now, here's really the thing we never tell each other. When the Bible was translated in those early centuries from Greek to Latin, before Constantine, the most common translation of the word logos, which we say word, was not verbum, which is the Latin word for word. It was sermo. Now, sermo, which is the root of the word sermon, is really a conversation. It's not a single sort of thing right here. I'm uttering a word, but it's a conversation, a relationship. Conversation always means relationship. You're talking to one another. So right there in John 1, if we're listening to people that translated him very early, they're hearing conversation. Now let me read this and see what you think. In the beginning was the conversation. And the conversation was with God, and the conversation was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. Now here's my point. The God that John speaks of, and in fact it's not original to John, it is our tradition, is the God who yearns to be in conversation, which is where I started this whole thing. These are my relationships with my friends, and I want to be in conversation. And the good news is, that's what God wants too. To be in relationship, to be in conversation. And we don't have to have all the answers. Oh, I only have 5 minutes? 5 seconds. We don't have to be. We don't have to be the ones with all the answers. We have to be in conversation. We have to be in relationship. And sometimes our conversations are going to be truly ridiculous. And we're going to veer off course. And we're going to get messed up in our conversations with one another. And we're going to be mad at each other. You've never seen Mad Till You've Seen Eve, and I go at it in a conversation. We've had our moments. But this very wise woman said, I said one time after one of our most ridiculous ones, but you know, it's always the ridiculous conversations where you have the most emotion. You know, we're fighting over who's going to do the laundry. Okay. Don't even ask, it's a thing with me. We're fighting over that, and so we get over it, and I say, so now what do we do? You know what she said? We go on. That's what we're called to do, you see. We go on. And we continue the conversation. And we learn again. And we clarify misunderstandings. And we apologize. And we accept apology. And we try to leave the guilt behind us because really it's over. And we try to continue in the conversation. In the beginning was the conversation. Think about Jesus as the conversation. And we've got a whole new image to live in. Thank you all. Thank you all.